Hello and welcome. My name is Inge Patsch and today I would like to talk you through the new institutional theory by Roger Hollingsworth. This theory comes in very handy if you want to analyze or ask the question, how does innovation or change happen? So for this analysis, Roger Hollingsworth identified 5 different levels on which this analysis can happen. And these 5 levels do increase in terms of stability from top to the bottom, while the flexibility is exactly opposite. So the flexibility is the highest in the output and performance and the lowest probably institutions. But let's have a look at the 5 levels. The first level he would identify would be institutions. So institutions he would define as norms, rules, conventions, habits and values. So if you remember a typical iceberg model, this would be all the things which are below the water surface in the iceberg, which cannot be seen. All those things which we are not consciously aware about, but which shape our daily behavior and also therefore shape which institutional arrangements we create. A very interesting research here I find is the work of Dan Ariely from America. He did a lot of amazing works, and one thing he, for example, figured out is that we have 2 different value systems in ourselves. So he could empirically show that we all act according to a social value system as well as an economic value system. And the very interesting finding in different researches which we found was saying we work most efficiently if we are in the social value system. So if we are in a situation where someone asks us to just do a favor, we work the most efficient. While we work second most efficient if we are an economic value system and someone is paying us what we perceive being a fair and full salary, and we work the least efficient if we are in an economic value system and then we are paid below price. So you can find his book Predictable Irrationality online, as well as a lot of nice videos from him if you're interested in the topic of values and economics more. But now these institutions in Roger Hollingsworth theory would, for example, shape the institutional arrangements which we have in a society, so in a state, for example. It would shape the different power distribution between markets, states, corporate hierarchies, networks, associations, and communities. So depending on which norms or values are high, maybe markets would be stronger or the state would be stronger. And we will have a second look at the slide at this institutional arrangements in the next slide. So let me now come to the third sector, institutional sectors. So same like institutional arrangements are shaped by institutions, institutional sectors are shaped by institutional arrangements. So the number of institutional sectors he leaves basically open, but he would give some examples saying, for example, the financial system, the education system, business system, or the system of research, so all the academic system, the cultural system, etc., etc. There might be many. And then only within these institutional sectors, there would be the organizations. So organizations have a lower stability. So this means it doesn't matter whether there is Hypo Alpe Adria Bank or not. The financial sector basically stays the same. So the way the financial sector is shaped, the type of organizations you can find there, the way they interact, this is staying more stable than maybe individual organizations in that layer. And then last but not least, when it comes to change and innovation, he would talk about how output and performance are the most flexible one and the least stable one. So be it the statutes of an organization and what they work on, administrative decision, the quantity and the quality of the products produced, the laws and regulations given by governments, by local municipalities, etc. These are like the most flexible and they can easiest be changed. So let us have a look at the second level of analysis a bit closer at the institutional arrangements. Under institutional arrangements, as we already said, he would identify these 6 institutional arrangements, which he differentiates on the one hand based on the action motive, so if it's a self-interest or a social obligation, and on the distribution of power, whether the distribution of power is horizontal, so equally, or hierarchical, vertical, so that there is someone with more power and someone with less. And then he would say markets are, for example, where self-interest dominates with a horizontal power distribution, at least in theory. And then hierarchies. So hierarchies are for him all kinds of organizations, from NGOs to profit-oriented businesses, to associations, to all kind of organization which have a typical hierarchical order to it, but which are not like state-owned, for example. State would be the next one, which he would see in the vertical level, but with the social obligation. And then he would talk about the community as a particular expression of institutional arrangements, which is the community, which is everything which is handled in a horizontal manner outside the market, the hierarchies, and the state. And then last but not least, he would also identify this notion of networks as well as associations in being like in the overlapping area in the middle of these whole things, neither being fully self-interest oriented nor being fully social obligation oriented, neither being fully horizontal nor fully vertical. So what I find quite interesting about this is how we very often, or at least in the political sphere, very often things are only debated whether the market should regulate it or the state should regulate it, but that there is actually a whole range of other institutional arrangements which could be organizing things. So for example, in Nepal, I experienced how many things would have been organized by the communities as the state was not existing or not just simply not doing it, and the market for the market, it was not profitable enough. So I saw a very strong notion or a very strong communities aspect actually during my lifetime or my work in Nepal, while the hierarchies would be very different and not so many, because hierarchies type of organization and the number of organizations as we know them from Austria, where almost everyone is in a typical employee-employer condition, didn't exist to that extent in Nepal. So it's much more over here with small self-employed people. So if you look into different countries, you can really perceive how this is very, very different, and it helps a lot to actually do a first level of analysis. But now on the institutional sectors, this is a drawing from the master thesis I did, where I wanted to visualize how, for example, the institutional sector of culture overlaps with other institutional sectors, such as the business sector, the leisure time sector, the state sector, and the educational sector. And I remember having been writing a statement, something like that the business sector is moving in further and further, taking over more and more space, particularly in the leisure time and in the cultural sector. And I was debating how this would change the way culture, for example, is. So I think that's a phenomenon we see, which has also been discussed by different authors, how there is a kind of economization of everything, which is part of the story of neoliberalism, but I think that would be something for a new video. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, and see you next time.